Welcome to the Naval News segment. Today we're going to talk about the Zumwalt-class. We have some new information as to what we're going to be doing that coming to us from Naval News. Naval News written by the segments by Peter Ung. We haven't read anything by Peter yet, so this is the first story. We'll see how it goes here. Peter writes the latest details on hypersonic missile integration on board the Zumwalt-class destroyers. So that's right. That's what we're going to do here is we're going to put hypersonic missiles on our 3 Zumwalt classes, which I think is a good idea. But let's see what Peter thinks first. He says, the U.S. Navy plans to field conventional prompt strike, CPS, hypersonic missile on board the 3 Zumwalt-class destroyers. These missiles are set to take place to replace the interactive 155mm advanced gun turrets on board the Zumwalt, DDG-1000s. USS Michael Moore, DDG-1001, USS Lyndon B. Johnson, 1002. Naval News asks us for additional information to substitute process. So what they're going to do here, these 2 guns are 155mm guns designed for long-range shore bombardment and naval engagement as well. But the program kind of went awry where they didn't get the railgun technology to work in time to put on board. So they decided to put a regular, well, it's not really a regular, but it's a 155mm cannon on both. There's 2 cannons there, one under each cover. And the munitions for them were GPS guided, fin stabilized, which meant that they could actually glide for a little bit and go very long range. But they were also $800,000 a pop. So even if you wanted to shoot training rounds, you were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars just on training rounds. And the Navy was like, we just can't justify the cost. We can't even afford to train with this gun, much less actually use it. Because they were costing, almost as much, as a Tomahawk missile each time we shot one of these things. So we've never used them. They've been on board, these big ass, guns. And now we're going to rip them off. And in its place where the turret goes down into the boat here, because they're going to rip the turret out, they're going to put in what's called a advanced modular weapon package. Anyway, it's the same thing that's on the Trident USSGNs, except they're going to put 3 hypersonic missiles in each one of these advanced silos. So there's going to be a little silo here and a little silo here, VLS, vertical launch. And there's going to be 3 in each. So a total of 6 hypersonic missiles are going to be in the Zumwalt class. It's going to go into dry dock in 2024, and they're going to begin missile testing with this new weapon system in 2025. Let's see if he can add anything else to that here. He does talk about the cost of this long-range precision fire, LRPF, can do 100 kilometers, but like he said, it's $800,000 to $1 million per shot. And that was the death nail for this program. Is not only was it going to be the fancy rail gun like they had dreamed about doing, but never really got around to doing. It can't even be a 155mm gun because they went crazy with the ammunition. They decided to make it this extended range GPS shell, and that was a huge mistake. Even though that's a fantastic shell, obviously you can't afford this per shell, per fire. It's way too expensive. So the Navy decided to replace this in fiscal year 21 budget. The Navy decided replacing the gun turrets with hypersonic VLS conventional prompt strike missiles, 1 silo in each turret. So 2 packages. What I can't remember is the name of that silo. It's like advanced something. It's a APM. I'll see if he has it here. He says the Navy's CPS hypersonic missile used to deploy aboard the USS Ohio guided-class missile submarines, or SSGNs, around fiscal year 2025. Oh, yeah. The Ohio class is going to be firing these 2, apparently. The U.S. Army will be the first service branch to receive the hypersonic missiles termed long-range hypersonic weapons, or LRHW, for the U.S. Army, slated for Army service in 2023. So Army's going to get it first. Navy's going to get it in 2025. CPS uses a common glide body. We've talked about that before here. We don't need to rehash that. CPS missiles reportedly have a range of 1,700 miles, but we do know that they did a recent test where the mileage was closer or over 4,000 miles away, but that test failed. So it is probable that future builds of the CPS is going to be over 4,000 miles. But right now, the public number is 1,700 miles. So there you go. The CPS hypersonic missile is too large to fit inside a standard Mark 41 VLS tube, so the Navy's Aegis weapon system is going to use the Mark 57 vertical launch system on board the Zumwalt-class destroyers. So that's going to be the name of it, Mark 57 vertical launch system. There's another name for it that is escaping me right now. And then here they had an interview with the Navy confirming that they will be dry docking in 2024. The missiles will occupy the AGS turret spaces, so they're not going to be redoing the bow. They're not going to be ripping this whole thing apart and putting more silos in there. Because if you look, let's zoom this in again, each one of these little black things right here, this is a sailor. So if you assume the sailor is near 6 feet tall, you can get an idea of just how big this ship is and how big these turrets are. These things are like Iowa-class turrets, if not bigger. I mean, they're really huge. So if they wanted to cut more holes into the bow, they could put a silo here, a silo here. They could easily fit 3 of them with 3 missiles apiece for a total of 9 weapons there, 9 here and 9 here. They certainly have the room for that, but that would require a lot of hull cuts into the ship. That would change the displacement of the ship significantly. And then with that, they would have to redo calculations on stability. That would be a mess. That would take a long time, cost a lot of money. It makes more sense to simply rip out these 2 turrets, leaving 2 voids, 2 holes, whatever you want to call it, topside in the ship, and fill those voids with these silos, shooting these hypersonic missiles. I think it's a good use. This is finally going to bring the Zumwalt into some sense of usefulness, because it's not a bad design. The more I've learned about it, it's not bad. It's just it was hamstrung by its inability to fight. And so with hypersonic missiles on it, that's going to give it some punch. Now, something to consider is hypersonic long-range fires anyway. Long-range fires in general are so fast and so long-range, doesn't make sense to put them on a ship. It may not. In other words, you may not need to. A long-range fire from Alaska will get to the same target pretty much anywhere in the world in about the same time as a long-range fire from San Diego. So having a ship near Hawaii or in the South China Sea, how much time are you buying yourself? How much more capability are you buying yourself with this? But the Navy's decided that it's enough. It's worth the cost. And other navies are doing it too. The Russian Navy is deploying their hypersonic weapons on their ships. That begins next year, by the way. So if they begin in 2022 and our system begins in 2025, obviously there's a 3-year gap there, where the Russians can, learn and make their system a little bit better before we even start using ours. So we are a little bit behind in this. So let's see what chat thinks. Do you think this is a good idea? Is this a waste of money? Like, should we just retire this ship, or should we put hypersonic weapons on it? Or this is what we thought they were going to do before they made this announcement, is they were going to put a Mark 41 VLS launcher, like what was on the Ticonderoga, into the bow of this. But they're not doing that. So what do you guys think? Jam says, should the Navy not at least retain a gun for this class? Well, they don't have a gun right now to retain, so they would have to install a gun, and they've chosen not to do that. So I understand your position, I certainly do, but the Navy's decided to not even install a gun. Yeah, retire it. I'll tell you what, I was on board with retiring it, but now that it's made, we might as well get some use out of it, because we spent billions of dollars building these things. Let's see if we can do it. Pope Pete says, I think it's a good idea. Adds 16 more missiles in the 80s on it already. Well, yeah, right now they plan on putting 1 missile silo here and 1 missile silo there with a 3-pack in each. It's a total of 6 missiles. A DDG with no guns. I know, right? Yeah, it's got no guns. There are guns here. They just don't have any ammunition. So they might as well not be guns, is my point. What would you say? Would you say that the Visby class is a viable warship than the Zumwalt? I don't know that much about the Visby to answer that, to be honest with you. So here's something that I like about the Zumwalt, is they put a lot of the radars and stuff up here above the bridge. Or if you guys remember the Ticonderoga from the Tycho brief, the bridge was above the radars. And the problem with that is that you have all the people up here, and every time the boat sways around, they go for a ride like it's a carnival. So they learned from the Tycho experience to put the people below the fancy radars. You know, not everybody needs to be in the crow's nest at the top of the ship, like they had in the Tycho. Anyway, all right, so let's move on to the next story here. This one is, we know what happened to the Connecticut now. The Navy has finished their investigation on the USS Connecticut, and they've determined that the Connecticut did run aground and ripped off its sonar dome. Next story. No. Okay, let's give them some credit here. This is the Drive WarZone, written by Joseph Therovic. USNI News reported this first, so credit to USNI News for doing this first, that the U.S. Navy has concluded the Zumwalt-class nuclear submarine USS Connecticut struck an uncharted seamount last month. An accident has left the stricken pier side in Guam. That's where it is now. This comes at what appears to be the first official picture of any kind showing the submarine in Guam has emerged. This is Secretary of the Navy Del Toro. He is on board a submarine tender here. So they do have a submarine tender in Guam now, and this tender and some civilian shipyard personnel from Puget Sound, which is up where near where the Connecticut's home based, have been flown out to Guam to assess the damage and work with this tender to try and repair it in Guam. That's the goal. We'll see if they actually can do that. I hope they don't compromise the ship's integrity, watertight integrity, to rush a repair. I really want to see this submarine USS Connecticut go to dry dock. I think that's the right answer. It's going to take a long time to do that. I understand, very expensive, and there may not be a dry dock available. I mean, the dry dock schedule been out for years in a lead. So they would have to bump somebody, which would cause a cascade effect on that schedule if they decided to insert the USS Connecticut into any one dry dock, which is probably why they're trying to do it with this submarine tender here and some civilian workers from Puget Sound. Anyway, back to the piece here. It says, Navy Vice Admiral Carl Thomas, head of U.S. 7th Fleet, which has it forward deployed headquarters in Japan, will now determine what disciplinary action might be taken as a result of the accident, which occurred on October 2nd, reportedly in the South China Sea. According to USNI News, a previous report from the same outlet said that Commander Submarine Force U.S. Pacific Fleet ComSub PAC, that's like the big boss there, guys, ComSub PAC was conducting its own investigation into the incident, and it's unclear what the status of the review is present. So yeah, the CO could still lose his job. And this is what sucks, is like whenever the USS San Francisco ran aground and they did fire the CO and a few other people, that's because after the investigation, they found that there were deficiencies in crew's response, in their training records. And that's what they're doing. They're not just looking at the ship and the ship's logs as to what happened that day. They go back into the training binders of all the departments of seeing if anybody missed training one day, because you have weekly training, you have monthly training. What were the grades and the exams of the crews themselves? Because you have to take a written exam every month in your department and in your division. And so if you consistently underperform and don't show improvement, they can then blame the leadership for saying, hey, the sailor's been underperforming for months. He was on watch when you ran aground. That's your fault, Captain, not the sailor's fault. Even though it was an uncharted seamount that they hit. And that's kind of what happened to the USS San Francisco. So maybe, and the Navy has, a long history of doing this. If you run aground, for whatever reason, the captain's gone, navigator's gone, whoever was on watch, gone. So we'll see if they actually don't do that this time, because all public information so far is they hit an uncharted seamount and they were using the right charts. And if that's the case, and if their training records are all up to date, there's really no reason to fire anybody. Get better charts is the answer. But Navy loves to chop off heads whenever things like this happen. So we'll see what they actually do. Let's go back to the piece. I went on a tangent there for some reason. He says, thanks to a picture seen above dated October 30th, 2021, the Secretary of the Navy, Carlos Del Toro, being given a tour of submarine tender USS Emory S. Land. We now have been given our first on-the-ground look at the Connecticut. And it's not entirely clear when Secretary Del Toro first touched down on the island, or if he's still there. He's not still there now. He's like up in Japan now. Anyway, but what's important here is if you look at this picture, you can see the top of the sail and the little water break that's on the forward part of the sail. And there are no missing tiles. There's no apparent damage on the sail. I'll move my cursor out of the way so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So whatever they hit was not at their depth or above them. It was something either right in front of them, like they hit a wall, or it was like something right below them that they kind of scraped over and ripped off the dome. One of those two things happened, but it did not apparently damage the top side of the submarine, which is really important. It means it didn't hit a ship, you know, and even if you hit another submarine, well, a submarine can go below you or go above you, but no other submarine has claimed to have taken damage or has any evidence of showing damage. See, Del Toro's visit to Guam was not surprising, given the slightest given the island's immense strategic position in the Western Pacific. It makes good sense that the Secretary would want to get a first-hand look in the latest update of the status of the Connecticut, one of the Navy's most prized assets out there. Absolutely. And here they zoom in on that sail. You get a much better picture. And I'll tell you what. Yeah, I'm going to tell you. Right here, you see this part? This part here is very fragile. Where my cursor is, I'm not going to tell you why it's fragile, and it's intact. So it did not take any shock, at least the forward part of the sail. All right, I'm going to shut up now. Oh, hey, there's my video. Look at this. So if you want more, I go into depth on this on my YouTube video called Connecticut Damage Update. You'll notice the thumbnail says the front fell off. It's up there on my YouTube page. And I think that's enough of that. Here's a great picture of the sonar dome. Well, it's called the Large Bow Array because they want to change names. Whenever I grew up in the Navy, this was called sonar domes. Anyway, it's a 24-foot massive passive array there, inactive. And it's got a hull array around it. That's what those three staves are. Down here, this is a special sonar that I don't think that's public information, so we won't talk about that. But I'll show you a picture of it. There it is. Yep. All right, and that's USS Connecticut before the incident. So here you can see this part right here is no longer there. You see where my cursor's at? You see that right there? Yeah. This got ripped off, the whole thing. Above the waterline, below the waterline, gone. Long gone. Anyway, so the Navy has concluded its investigation. They ran aground. Disciplinary action is, being determined. All right, what do you guys think? Anybody want to add to this? Ghetto home improvement fixer? Well, yeah, that's what I'm afraid is going to happen. I mean, I know the shipyard workers do good work, and they have a submarine tender there with workshops and stuff in the tender to help them machine parts and stuff. But they're not going to be able to machine a sonar dome. You're not going to be able to do that. But can they verify the integrity of the hull without putting it in dry dock? I'm telling you that they cannot do that. But maybe in 2021 they've got new techniques that have changed since I've been in the Navy, and maybe they're going to try. They lost most of their disco ball. I know, yeah, you can see the top of the disco ball right here. That's the disco ball right there. What about a mobile dry dock? That's the thing. Is we do have mobile dry docks. Those do exist. They're slow, and maybe they're bringing one. I don't know. But one thing that I think is the best option is to hire a commercial heavy lift vehicle like they did with the USS Cole after its bombing over there. I think it was in Oman. And they shipped it all the way halfway around the world back to the United States for repairs. They could get another heavy lift vehicle, which is a commercially owned, basically a dry dock that lifts your ship or submarine, in this case, out of the water and carries it to wherever you want it to be. That's what I think they should do. I think that's what they're going to do. But I can't fault the Navy for trying this first, flying out some civilian workers from Puget Sound, putting them on the with the tender's facilities, and just seeing if they can fix it that way. It's a good effort. I don't think it's a bad idea. I just don't think it's going to be the end all end. That's not going to fix it. Is my position. Maybe China can make the new sonar dome. Oh man, that would be kind of ironic if they did, wouldn't it? Cotton Cuddles here, he says, so how long roughly would the sub be out of action? That's a good question. It depends on if they have a sonar dome or not, and if they need to repair the hull. So I've got a couple of friends, I'll call them acquaintances, online acquaintances who are in Guam right now, and they tell me that main ballast tank 1, the one that's all the way forward, is damaged and not airtight. So if they're right, and they were absolutely right about the sonar dome being broken, so I trust them, even more now. If they're right about main ballast tank 1 leaking air, they're going to have to do some hull welds on that and do that in a way that doesn't add to the ship's noise. Again, dry dock. Assuming that there's no dome prefabricated, in other words, they got to build a new sonar dome. Who knows how long that could take? Where the hell are they going to do that? Like, I think they build them in Rhode Island or Electric Boat up in Connecticut, one of those two places. Ship it across the country to Seattle. Yeah, we're talking at least a month in dry dock, at least 4 weeks. And then, and the dry dock period hasn't even begun yet. So, man, it could be months before we see the Seawolf back in action again. Yeah. But I'll tell you this, we will see it back in action again. We will repair the submarine. Absolutely. Yeah. They're not going to retire the sub. No. Anyway, what else we have? 5 Gas Meters says this was a massive disinformation job. They want China to find the sonar dome, but it's really engineered to make China's garbage. Okay. Jesus. That went down a path I did not expect when I started reading that sentence. Sunfish says they could do temporary repairs to make it back to the U.S. They certainly could do that. But I would not submerge the ship without a bow dome cover, because you don't want any forward pressure on this bulkhead. What bulkhead am I talking about? Come on, right here. All right, do you see this white wall right here? Yeah, that's not designed to have a lot of water push on it. Yeah, you could break this. So this is special sound absorbent material, by the way. Like if you push enough on that, you could damage whatever's behind it, which is main ballast tank 1, by the way. Main ballast tank 1 is right there. So yeah, temporary repairs so they could surface transit back to Seattle would save money. It would not save time because the surface transit would be like maybe 5 knots, and then God forbid they get caught up in a storm. Oh boy. Yeah, that's a nightmare. Oh, they could go backwards. I don't know if they would do that, but that is a good idea. Yeah. Pope Pete says bow domes for the Columbia-class are being made in Gulfport, Mississippi. So maybe they could make it there too if they have the facilities. Okay. Cool beans. Good info, Pope Pete. Thank you. Look at you. You're adding to the open source intelligence here. Anyway, so that's what happened to the Connecticut. She hit the ground, ripped the dome off. Now she's going to get repaired. The end. Let's move on. All right. This story here, U.S. Navy's Constellation-class frigate VLS cell count debate settled. We now know how many VLSs will be on the Constellation-class frigate when she's built. 32. The end. Do you want to know more? Okay, fine. We can talk about it. This comes from Naval News, written by Peter Ong, O-N-G. Defense media, think tanks, critics, skeptics, and internet trolls and naval commentators have stated that the U.S. Navy's FFG-62 Constellation-class and replacement to the venerable Oliver Hazard Perry class frigate should have 48 Mark 41 vertical launch cells compared to the required 32. The reason why they think that is because we're retiring the Ticonderoga class that had 122 VLS on it. And so this ship clearly not as big as the Ticonderoga class is, but they should have at least 48 VLS. And what they're forgetting, or what they're failing to mention, these internet trolls, also known as critics and skeptics on the internet, is that this ship has the NSM, the Naval Strike Missile, which is a stealth version of the Harpoon. And it's a little bit faster than the Harpoon is. But the biggest thing is the enemy won't see that missile coming until right before it hits it, which is a really cool thing about the NSM. So with the NSM, you do get 48 missiles on board. You just don't get them in a VLS. And so what they're promoting, what these media think tanks are promoting is, hey, we need to have the same number of VLSs or as close to it as what we had before. We want to minimize the reduction of vertical launch tubes in the Navy in total. Because instead of counting missiles, they're counting VLS tubes. And there's a good argument for that. And I'll tell you what it is the VLS tube can carry a variety of missiles, including ballistic missile theater defense missiles. Okay, so it can do surface-to-air missiles, theater defense, all sorts of missiles, where the 16 NSM Naval Strike Missiles that are being added to the 32 VLS for the frigate, those are strictly anti-ship missiles. But you still have 32 cells that you could put, surface-to-air missiles in, or even if they have the right radar, which looks like they might, They could even put the SM-2 Alpha in there, which could do some ballistic missile defense. Okay, these commentators state that with the retirement of the Aegis radar-equipped cruisers and destroyers, the U.S. Navy will have a shortage of VLS cells to counter peer nations. Again, they're just counting VLS cells, and I've already told you why they're doing that, because of the variety of weapons you can put in a VLS. The Congressional Research Service, CRS. So if you never heard of CRS, that's by design. CRS is a group of individuals that they're basically staffers that work up in the Capitol, Washington, D.C., and they do all the research for the senators, congressmen, and their committees, so that so the senators, the people on those committees, have fact-based information available to them, given to them, that they study or read before they make decisions. And then before they hear testimony from like admirals and generals, they already have like certain numbers, like what we're about to read. This information comes from this unbiased group of common staff. In other words, it doesn't matter what political party or even who's in office. This is the deep state. These are the people that are not elected. Doesn't matter who's in office. They're always there. They're the same people, and they provide information to whoever got elected next. You're elected now. This is your information. So this is like an unbiased federal source called the Congressional Research Services, part of the Library of Congress. If you want more, Google that stuff. It's really interesting. Oh, if you want to work in Washington, D.C., but not be a politician in front of the camera, you want to work for the Library of Congress, and being CRS is a pretty good spot. This is a very powerful position for not being elected. Listen, I'm going to stop right there. Okay, quote from the CRS, from our unbiased source: the Navy began procuring Constellation-class frigates in 2020, fiscal year 2020, and wants to procure a total of 20 FFG-62s. Congress funded the first in 2020 at $1.2 billion. Second year, which was fiscal year 2021, at a cost of $1.1 billion, rounding up. And the next year, fiscal year 2022, $1.1 billion. So going forward, these are going to cost $1.1 billion a pop. Initial startup cost was that, and now this is what it is. The procurement for the third FFG and a $69.1 million advance AP fund for the fourth and fifth, which are programmed for procurement for future fiscal years. Okay, so we already put like a down payment on the following fourth and fifth year of this program. Keep in mind, we're going to build 20 Constellation-class frigates right now. That number can probably change in the future, but that's what we're going with in the beginning. Okay, by comparison, the CRS released data on the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer the same day, saying that the starting cost stated that the cost of the DDG-51. So for 51 for the Arleigh Burkes, it's approximately $2 billion each, due to be reduced due to production economies of scale. If you build two at a time, the second one doesn't cost as much. And so the estimated cost is $2.4 million, about $2.4 billion. There we go, about $2.4 billion. DDG-51 Flight 1 and Flight 2 have 90 Mark 41 vertical launchers, VLSs, but the new ones, the ones we're building now, Flight 2 Alpha and Flight 3, have 96 VLS. So again, we're counting VLS tubes. So FFG Constellation class with 32 VLS has roughly half of the Mark 41 firepower of DDG-51, of the early 51s, not including the separate 16 Naval Strike Missiles. That's what I was telling you about there. So if you add 32 to 16, you get 48, and that brings you up to exactly half of the 96 VLS that are in the Flight 3 Arleigh Burkes. These are all facts that the Library of Congress, gives to the committees and say, hey, here's the facts, make a decision. What are you going to fund? And then the Navy goes in there and says, hey, this is what we need. Here's our budget. And that's how all this works. If you didn't know. There's a lot of gobbledygook here. Talking about decommissioning the Ticonderogas. They had 122 missiles apiece. At least the later ones did. Yep. All right, so back to the quote. It says, to grow from 32 missiles. Oh, this is important. To take the Constellation class from 32 cells to 48 cells necessitates an increase in a length of the ship's small beam and roughly a 200-ton increase. So they would have to make the bow part, at the very least, if not the entire thing, a little bit wider. That's redesigning the ship at that point, which means, yeah, you got to address stability, seakeeping analysis, adapting ship services to accommodate additional 16 VLS tubes. It's not as simple as plugging in a few more VLS cells. You got to completely change the length and size of the ship, width of the ship rather. A change of this nature would unnecessarily delay detailed design, causing significant disruption in ship designs, particularly the smaller ship designs. Potentially, competitors have already completed their conceptual designs and are entering the detailed design phase with 32 cells in mind. Yeah, to make a change now would have ripple effects, yeah, as well as cost $16 million to $24 million per ship. So, yeah, like, there's no reason to make this change now. And the Navy has decided, I think I skipped that part unintentionally, the Navy has decided that they're going to stay with 32, here it is, on October 2021. So that's, yeah, last month. FFG 62 frigate report provided the U.S. Navy's answer and deciding evidence on settling for 32 VLS cells per new frigate instead of the suggested by the think tanks and internet trolls of 48. So this matter's already been resolved. We know now that the new Constellation-class frigate will have 32 VLS up here in the bow instead of 48. All right. So what do you guys think of that? I think it was a good call to not redesign the ship now. I mean, you know, that's another version of project creep, where you start with a project and you have goals, and, you know, without firming up the schedule, you keep coming up with ideas and you're like, wouldn't it be great if we added this? And if you do that too many times, which is very common, and any project manager will tell you that it's a big problem with large projects like this, is you'll make a project so complex or so much bigger than it was originally intended that it outscopes and outscales itself, and you run out of money, you run out of time. Projects ends up, if it's even created, being, you know, grossly expensive, like the Zumwalt. The Zumwalt was a product of project creep. All right, what do you guys think? Pentagon Wars. Yeah, that's a great movie, Pentagon Wars. Yeah, you guys are saying the same thing I am about the Zumwalt. Yeah, exactly. The Zumwalt had the same problem. And kudos to the Navy for not repeating this mistakes of 20 years ago, because it was about 20 years ago when those project creeps were happening. Remember, right after 2000, it was a new millennia. Everyone had big dreams. 21st century. Let's go LCS. Let's go Zumwalt. Let's add things. And then they couldn't afford them, so they took the weapons off, you know? And it was a mess. And they're not doing that with the Constellation. So well done for not repeating mistakes. You know, hats off to them for that. All right. Is there anything worth reading in chat? What do you guys think? Biter says, why replace firepower with a Tycho with a vessel that's this small? Oh, because it has a lot of the capability of the Tycho. It doesn't have the number of weapons. And the Navy has decided, this is not just the Navy, the United States military, all branches, is going to a diversified strategy. We're going with more smaller bases around the globe. Yeah. More smaller bases, more diversification of arsenal and people, equipment. Yeah. We will all be America soon. AAD says quantity has a quality all its own. Well, we're going with a diversification has a quality all its own. But yeah, I kind of get where what you're getting at. All right. Well, that's the Naval News segment for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's been a few days since we did this, and we'll be back with some more gameplay in a minute. Bye. Don't go anywhere.